Welcome back to Tech Check, my friends. My name's Gareth, and I just want to share a little bit of news. We've hit 1,000 subscribers! So I just want to say a massive thank you and a huge appreciation from myself to each and every one of you. Without your continued support, we would have never reached 1,000. And what's meant to be only 7-8 months ago, I never thought we'd get here. So really appreciate every comment, every like, every share, and every subscription from each and every one of you. Thank you very much, and hopefully you guys can continue to help us grow the channel, and hopefully some newer and nicer things coming as well. So I just wanted to kick the show off this week by just saying a massive thank you. Back to our weekly content, and we've got another PC build. And to be fair, this is a little bit special because we've managed to cluster together loads of nice parts to build what I'm calling July's 1K challenge. And to be fair, I think we've smashed it, and I'm hoping that you guys agree. If you're interested in how to build in this VXR case, along with some really nice parts, some new, some used, stick around because we're going to be going through it step by step, and I hope you'll join me. Right then guys, so to kick things off, I just want to go through a quick parts list, what we're going to actually be using in this build. And if you guys are interested in anything that you see here today, I'll put a list of them in the description down below. There will be my Amazon affiliate links, so it doesn't cost you guys any more, but hopefully you'll see some value in what the parts can actually do and where we actually purchase them from. So some of them are new, some of them are used, and hopefully I can help you out a little bit. So starting off with the motherboard, this is MSI's B550 Gaming Plus. Absolutely fantastic value motherboard, guys, and features 95% of everything that X570 does, with the limitations of only the top 16 slot and the top M.2 slot being PCIe 4.0. But in terms of connectivity, it's got USB 3.2 Gen 1 and Gen 2, that being Type A and Type C. So if you've got Type C from your case, this is compatible. It's also, if your Type C isn't compatible with your case, then you do have an out at the back of the motherboard, which is great. In terms of cooling, it's got some extended VRM cooling. And in all honesty, this, comparable to a B550, if you want to save money on a motherboard and get 95% of what you would do if you were going to spend £100 more, this is a great option. In terms of graphics card, we have gone for an Rtx2070 Super from Gigabyte. This is a great card for high refresh gaming at 1080p and 1440p, and maybe get you up to around 40-50 FPS at 4K. So not for high-end 4K gaming, but absolutely if you're looking for high FPS at 1080p or 1440p. Another used part, guys, is this Ryzen processor. We didn't go for the 3rd gen Ryzen, we actually went for this 3700, which in my eyes, 8 cores, 16 threads, absolutely fantastic. If you're going to be gaming, you're going to be making the use of obviously 4-6 of those cores. If you're going to be content creating, this offers the opportunity for brilliant render times, and it's a really good chip, guys. Now, yes, the 5600, which has come out, which is 6 cores, 12 threads, is comparable to this, but at the time of filming this, number one, we couldn't find one, and number two, they are around £50 to £70 more than what we could get the 3700 for used. For our storage, we've gone for a 1TB SSD from Crucial. This is the BX500, and this will be brilliant for our games library and things like that. If you've got any videos or any photos or anything like that, decent speed transfers, not of M.2 or NVMe storage, but still a really good SSD. Links down below in the description. In terms of our Windows boot drive, we have gone for a Western Digital Black. This is a 500 gig drive. It is M.2 drive, and this has got much quicker speeds than what this SSD and obviously standard hard drives. With it being Gen 3, it does only obviously transfer up to around 3,500 megabytes, but it is plenty fast enough for what we're doing. We can manage to put our boot drive on this, and we've still got around 400 gigs which is left. So absolutely fantastic. I always say to customers, put on their number 1, number 2 most played games. This will prove much quicker in terms of loading times, in terms of rendering times for the game, and you'll get a much better experience as well. So for our RAM, guys, we have gone for Corsair LPX Vengeance. This is 16 gigs of their 3600 megahertz. It is C16 as well, so a really good, decent latency on it. And in all honesty, 3600, tried and tested with Ryzen platform as well. So I would always encourage people to get 3600 megahertz or 32 at a lower C level, and then you'll make the most out of it. We've gone for the Corsair RM650X. Brilliant power supply, guys. Never had an issue with one. Really nice cables, fully modular. And one thing I always say is do not cheap out on a power supply. It's the one thing that powers everything else that's in your system. So always invest nicely in this. In terms of cooling, we've gone for this MSI Core Liquid 360R. Looks nice. Got a few fans on the front of here that light up. Not used this. Quite excited to see, number one, how it actually performs, and number two, how it actually works. So, quite honest with you, not had any experience, but looking forward to actually using it. Less talking, let's get building. So then, the exciting part, guys. You've got all your parts, you've got them laid out. What's the next step? So, I always ask everybody, clear your desk space off. Make sure you've got plenty of room. We don't want to be potentially breaking anything and only have in front of you what you're actually going to need. So then, guys, first step, we want to install the CPU. First thing we need to do is pull back this retention bracket here, open up the socket. We can hold our CPU. Be careful, don't touch any of the pins on the back of the CPU. On Ryzen CPUs, the pins are on the back of the processor, not in the socket themselves, okay? So you need to be ultra careful with this. On the CPU, you will see there is a little triangle at the bottom corner down here. We need to match that triangle with the triangle which is on the socket as well, okay? So look for the triangle which is on the socket, which is up this corner up here. And all we need to do is pop this in. And when I say pop it in, we don't drop it, we don't press it down, we don't force it or anything like that. We just literally let it sit in and then it should just get in. There we go. We can pull back the retention bracket and that's it. Next step is our RAM. On the RAM sticks themselves, there is a little notch smack bang in the middle, okay? And it's closer to the left-hand side than it is the right-hand side. So what we need to do is we need to match this notch with regards to the notch which is on the DIMM slots themselves, okay? Now, the easiest way to do that is if you line them up and the notch fits, then perfect. If you put it the wrong way and the notch is not lined up, then please don't force it in because number one, you'll snap this, or number two, you'll cause damage to your motherboard, all right? So you may be thinking, well, I've got 2 sticks of RAM, but I've got 4 DIMM slots. What do I actually do? So on each and every motherboard, there's a little diagram down here which says DIMM A1, A2, B1, B2, okay? Now, if you're not sure, in your motherboard manual, it will show you which ones to actually put them in, okay? But please make use of either this diagram here or the motherboard manual so you're not obviously putting them in the wrong slots. Now, the easiest way to remember this is if you start off with the outermost slot and populate that, miss one, and then populate one again. So it's in, out, and you should be absolutely fine. Easiest way is if you get one side in first, push it down a little bit so it can't go no further, and then apply a little bit of force. Then we're in. And then we're going to miss one, and then we're going to populate the next one. There we go. So nice black RAM with this all blackout motherboard. Really nice. So next thing, guys, now we've got our CPU and our RAM installed, we need to install our NVMe drive or M.2 drive. Now, before we go ahead and do that, what we need to do is we need to remove this M.2 shield off of our motherboard. We can simply do that by just unscrewing these 2 little M.2 screws. And what you'll see is this shield will just pull up and come off. This is our WD Black, our 500 gig M.2 drive, which is here, and this is going to serve as our boot drive. Now, in order to install our drive, guys, all we need to do is simply line up our M.2 with the drive itself, push it in at a slight angle, and you'll see that we've installed it. Now, what we need to ensure is that the standoff is in the correct place so we can screw a little M.2 screw in on top of it to hold it in place. Now, it's not essential because the shield itself is going to be screwed down and that would hold it. In your motherboard box, you will find a little box, or a little bag, shall I say, of M.2 screws. They are the tiniest screws that you've ever seen in your whole life. So all we need to do is just pop that in there. Again, this doesn't need to be tight or anything like that, guys, and that's absolutely fine. When we're returning the shield over the top of the M.2, we need to remove this little plastic film here. We need to ensure that this goes back on correctly, and then we can return both screws as well. And again, doesn't need to be mega tight, guys. It's just there to provide some cooling for that M.2 drive and to keep it firmly in position. So then, guys, if you followed along, we will have our CPU correctly installed, nice and secure. We've got our RAM slots, which are utilizing the correct DIMMs, and they're nice and secure as well. And we've got our Gen 3 M.2 populating the uppermost M.2 slot on our motherboard, even though it's not Gen 4 and it's not going to make use of that PCIe 4 lane. We are obviously covering it by this shield here, which not only looks a little bit better, but it will provide a bit more cooling to that M.2 drive, so it can work a little bit hotter as well. So the Tecware VXR. This is very, very, very similar to the Lian Leo 11. And I really like it. It looks quite nice. Now, I've got the white version. I've built in the mini, the standard 011 and the XL version. But this looks very, very similar, and it's supposed to, guys. But to be quite frank with you, it's quite a little bit less than what the 011 is. So for somebody that either can't buy an 011 due to being out of stock, or hasn't got the budget to stretch that far for an actual Lian Li case, then this could be a viable alternative. So this is another part, guys, that's not brand new. You will see that there is 9 fans which are installed. So the customer installed his fans and then his motherboard, but realised his tower cooler wouldn't fit because of the clearance on this glass panel here. So as they say, one person's trash is another person's treasure. And the customer found a bargain, said, is it decent? I said, well, if it's anything like the 011, then it will be. So hopefully, let's get these installed. Let's see what it looks like. Uninstall these 4 thumb screws which are on the front. I've got grommets on, rubber ones, so you're not going to scratch this nice tempered glass panel. As you can see there, guys, one thing that's quite nice is because these corners are quite sharp, it actually comes with these plastic bits that go on the side, which means that, number one, you're not going to cut yourself or bang yourself, and yeah, I quite like that. You will see on the back here, you've got this see-through tempered glass here, but then you've got this blacked out bit here. I quite like that because it covers up this front panel here, which is, even though it's painted, it's not the best. Let's do the same for this glass panel here. Again, just remove the 4 thumb screws. So now, guys, you can start to feel that this is very, very similar to an 011D, okay? So you've got your side 360 mount in here, you've got your bottom 360 mount in there, and then you've got your 3 120 fans which can go at the top. Things to mention here, guys, there is absolutely no way that a 140mm fan can fit in anywhere in this case, okay? One of the differences, at the back of this case, it will not fit a 120mm fan either, okay? So at the rear here, it will not fit a 120. You can fit an 80, but it won't fit a 120. We've got this nice cutout here for the actual motherboard. So if you want to do any water cooling, or you want to obviously get easy access to the back for your CPU plate, then you've got plenty of room. Nice metal finish, painted finish, nothing spectacular, but again, nothing that I whinge or moan about. One other thing to mention here, guys, is you can only horizontally mount your GPU. There is no horizontal mounting option, okay? Now, there is other options you can do. You can buy basically a compatible part for this. I know that Cooler Master do one, and I know that Tecware do a vertical mounting bracket, which basically customizes this back panel here and allows you to vertically do it, but that is an additional extra. So at the back, guys, in order to get the side panel off, we just undo these 2 screws here. In terms of connectivity, what we have got is we've got our USB 2.0, which is there. We've got our HD audio, which is here. Our standard front panel connectors, which consists of a power switch, a reset switch, a power LED, positive and negative, and then a HDD light as well. So there is no USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type C on this particular case, which differs from obviously the Lian case. So obviously, if you are going to want in a Type C connection, this particular motherboard does have that. It has the Type A and the Type C USB 3.2. So we can still optimize that from the motherboard. The power supply goes down here. There is no versatility in terms of mounting it higher up. And obviously in the Lian ones, you've got the drive cages, which are up here, which can be removed. But that's obviously got the motherboard tray. But yeah, plenty enough distance. Looks about like 3 inches worth of distance from here to here. Probably about 1.5 to 2 inches from there to the end. So plenty enough room. No issues, no problems. Let's get it in. Right then, guys. First thing to mention, if your motherboard does not have an already installed I/O shield, then please ensure that you do that step now, because what you don't want to do is install the motherboard and then have to install the I/O shield and take everything out. Okay, so what we can do, guys, is just lower this down into the case. This case already comes with pre-installed standoffs as well, so you don't have to worry about any of that. And all we're looking to do is line everything up, and it should sit nicely on the pre-installed standoffs. Make sure that we are using the correct screws, guys. There's nothing worse than using the wrong screws, i.e. you can round off your standoffs, or you could potentially damage your motherboard. So ensure that you are using the correct ones. Now, the easiest way with this is making sure that you're using a magnetic screwdriver as well. And you don't want to over tighten these either, okay? I always find it easier just to go around the outer perimeter, and that way you can count how many that you've done. There should be 8 or 9. Now that we've got our motherboard installed, the next step is to install our cooler. But we need to figure out, are we going to be side mounting it, or are we going to be top mounting it? Don't know whether I'm going to be able to mount it, or whether I can move those fans down slightly, but I might be having clearance issues. I'm not quite sure. So what I'm going to do, guys, is we're going to get the cooler, and we're going to basically attach all the fans to the cooler. We're going to get it how we actually want it, because either way we need it as an exhaust. So we'll set that up, and then I'm just going to dry fit it to see where it's going to fit and if we're going to have any compatibility issues. I don't think we're going to have any issues here, because there's plenty of clearance from the VRMs to the top of the case. There's perhaps about 1.5 inches, including the fan here. So there should be around 2 inches worth of clearance. In terms of clearance coming out, again, we've got no issues there. But I can see that these fans are installed just behind the back of these top ones here. Okay, so if I turn that round and show you what I'm talking about. So let's get the cooler out. Let's have a quick look at that, and then we'll see what the best way to mount it is. So the Core Liquid 360R from MSI. So again, guys, 360mm cooler. Operates off of 3 120mm fans. It's an all-in-one, so quite excited to get into this. Let's get it done, and let's get it installed. So guys, now that we've got our cooler out of the box, lay everything out in front of you to determine what we're actually going to need. So I just want to run through some of these parts for you so you know what they are and how you can actually utilize them. So we've got our standard Intel bracket, which is here. Then we've got our Intel 2066 bracket, which is here. We've got our AMD AM4 bracket, which is here. And then we've got our TR4, which is for Threadripper, which is here. Now, you'll need these for Threadripper. You'll need these ones for the Intel. And you'll need this packet here for the actual AM4 connections. Then we've got a packet of our screws, which is obviously to connect the radiator to the case, and then our fans to the actual radiator. And I'll run that through that afterwards. It actually comes with some more thermal paste, which is here. We're not going to be utilizing that. But in terms of cables, guys, you've got a splitter cable here. So essentially what's going to happen is the 3 fans will face on top of the radiator, and those 3 fans will have hopefully either a 3-pin or 4-pin PWM header, and that will go into 3 of these cables here. This will then connect to your CPU header on your motherboard, okay? Now, you have got a Molex power connector or adapter here. So if you don't want to attach this to your CPU header, you can power them via Molex. Why you would want to do that, I don't know, but they do include an adapter there. This is actually a noise reducer, or basically a speed reducer. So it will cut the noise down essentially. Again, we're not going to use that because I want full control over this. Now, in terms of connectivity, the pump is actually just at the top here, and this will need to be connected to the pump header again on your motherboard. And then you've got RGB connection again, which will need to go down here to your motherboard connections, and I'll walk through all those connections afterwards. But essentially, guys, nothing which is too complex. I'm hoping, obviously, this will all be controlled via Dragon Center. The fans will be controlled via the hub at the back, and hopefully we can get everything in sync. So put away everything that you don't actually need. So in this case, we're not going to need the TR4 connections, or should we say nuts and bolts plus the plates. We're not going to need the Intel brackets either, so we can put those ones away. And essentially, we're just going to be left with what we're actually needing. Therefore, we're not going to get confused with regards to what nuts, what bolts, and what other cables we're going to need either. In terms of the fans, guys, they are 4-pin PWM, and they do have the RGB connections, which will connect up afterwards. Again, they're okay. They don't look amazing. They don't feel like they're amazing quality, but we'll see how they perform. They do have little rubber grommets at the ends, so a little bit of noise dampening against the case or against the radiator. Yeah, a frosted case as fan as well, so not too bad. They don't look terrible, but again, we'll have to see how they perform. So after a bit of trial and error, guys, we know that this cooler's not going to fit in the side mounted position here. Okay, now that's primarily just because there isn't enough room. Due to the fact that this pump is located on the actual radiator, it's, I would say, about 15-20 mil too long in order to be side mounted. Now, with a little bit of squeezing here and there, we should be able to remove these top 120 fans, and we should be able to top mount it. But what I need to do is I need to remove these 3 fans, or slide them down as far as they will go at the bottom down here. That's better. So we've moved these fans. We've moved these ones down, guys. Not as far as they'll go, but near enough. And I'm hoping we've created enough clearance at the top. But there's only one way to find out. Let's put it in. So just a couple of things then, guys. Now that we've played around with regards to how it's going to fit, where we want to obviously have the pipes from the AIO. Are we going to have them this way? Are we going to have them all crunched up this way, etc., etc.? So important to obviously test run it, dry fit it, just so that you can choose personally which way you prefer. What we need to do now, guys, is attach the fans, and the easiest way of doing that is we want it as an exhaust. So we want the air pushing through the fan, through the radiator fin stack, and exhausting out the top of the case. So we need to ensure that we have the front of the fan visible and the cage is located to the actual radiator. Okay, now another thing to note here, guys, is we want to make sure that these particular cables are going to be coming out the back of the case, so we want them here. So when we pick up this radiator and we install it into the case, you'll see that it's at the back just here. So next step, guys, is we want to be using the long screws, and we want to be going through the fan into the radiator. Okay, do not use these screws thinking that you can go this way like this, okay? Because you've just ruined your all-in-one, okay? So essentially, long screws if you're going through the fan into the radiator, and short screws if you're connecting the radiator to the top of the case. And these don't need to be mega tight either, guys. I would always advise just do one till it gets a little bit snug, go to the opposite corner, ensure that that one's in. Very much like when we're attaching pressure to the CPU, we want to make sure that we're doing alternative corners just to ensure that everything's nice. So essentially, guys, if you followed along, we should have all 3 fans installed with the cables down here coming out of the bottom of the radiator. That way we can easily cable manage it. We've decided that we are going to attach our radiator in this format here. So all we need to do now is we need to utilize the smaller screws by coming through the top of the case into the back of the radiator, securing it in place. I wouldn't advise, guys, at this point to tighten these up fully, okay? Now, the reason for that is because if you want to slide it from one way to the other, you're not going to be able to do that if you fully tighten them down. Right, guys, essentially all I've done is I've just disconnected all these cables at the back. So we've not connected anything, we've not done anything at the front. I just saw some of these cables, the way that they're routed, and there's some smarter ways of doing it to make the build look nicer, cleaner overall. So all I've essentially done is remove the fan hub, disconnected all the fan cables, and yeah, essentially what we're going to do is we're going to basically push these back through and utilize this back hole. So instead of seeing the cables, even though it's only ½ an inch at the front of the motherboard, we're going to reroute these back through these bottom cases down here. Quite a bit of work to do just for the sake of 2 cables, but it just means that all of these cables, I can route them nicely. I know where they are, what's going off with them, and I can check all the connections as well. I've not connected anything at the top up here. We'll move on to that as soon as I've got all of these connected. So they're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 back in sync order, and then we'll move back onto this. Little things bugged me, so bear with me. OCD kicked in. I just thought, oh, don't like it. Don't know what's going on. I don't want it. So what we're going to essentially do now, guys, is this GIM controller essentially provides RGB power and PWM power, or 3-pin power for the fans. So it can fit obviously 10 fans on this actual controller, and it can also do 2 LED strips as well. That is then powered by SATA power, which is there. So essentially what I'd like to do is just run from this bottom corner 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, we've got a midgie. So what all we're going to do is we're going to connect this into line 1, which is there, and then the next one, which is this one, number 2, and vice versa all the way across, guys, until we get to number 6. And that way we know that everything is in order and we know that they're all connected, so we shouldn't have any connection issues. Much happier now. That looks a million times better. So all I've essentially done, guys, is use some 3M tape on the back of that GIM fan controller, pushed it up and then connected it to, or stuck it to the back of this particular faceplate here. What I was actually talking about, guys, was these particular cables here was coming up here and through these grommets here, or these holes in the back plates. Now, it don't make a huge difference, and to be honest, it ain't going to make any difference in terms of temperatures or in terms of FPS, but those little subtle changes make a overall difference to how it actually looks aesthetically. So I feel better for doing it. I know that the customer will know that I've paid extra due care and attention when building it for him, and with me, that's what it's all about. I want to send these systems back to the customers how I would want to receive them myself. So much happier now. So essentially, guys, moving back to our cooler, next step is attaching our CPU cooler to our CPU. Now, all I've done is I've done a very basic mock-up here of and showing you guys what we need to do and how you need to attach it, but essentially it's dead straightforward. You get your AM4 bracket. We need to make sure that it comes in from the upside, okay? And all we need to do is screw that in like that, get this bolt, and then we can attach it just like that. Now, what I would advise, guys, is don't tighten them up too much. These little hooks here have got to go over these here, and then we need to tighten them up. Basically, one twist at the top, one twist at the bottom until we get a firm contact. All that's going to happen is that's going to fit on there like that. It's going to hook over, then the bottom one's going to hook over, and then we're going to gradually tighten them, one at the top, one bit at the bottom, until we get a really good contact. Now, one thing to note here, before we do that, there is film on here which we need to remove, and we also need to apply some thermal paste to the CPU. So go ahead and do that, guys. A nice little pea-sized shape in the middle of the CPU. It doesn't really make any difference. You can go OTT if you really want to, but that is ample there. Okay. Now, I would advise using some decent CPU paste, some MX4 or something like that. That way you're going to get the best thermal transition of heat. All right. So essentially, let's peel off this. Now, what we need to do, guys, is once we've peeled off this, don't touch this copper. We don't want any fingerprints in it or anything like that. So stay away from this. There is no thermal paste pre-applied, so you just need to be aware that we do need to apply our own. Okay. Now, I'm going to be doing this a little bit khaki-handed, and it might not go the way I want it to. But essentially, what we should be able to do is just hook this on here. There we go. So there we go, guys. So if I just tighten this one 2 times and then tighten this one 2 times and continue to do that until you get to a point where it won't tighten up anymore. And if you feel like you can't do it with your fingers, feel free to do it with the screwdriver. Essentially, guys, that's our CPU cooler attached to our CPU. You will notice that if this dragon isn't straight, then it does allow you to twist it, okay? So that is a neat little feature. I like that, because if not, it's a ball ache. How many times have you applied your CPU cooler and you've either put it on upside down, or there's a digital display and you think, oh no, I've got to take it off. I've got no more CPU paste, all those problems. What I have done is push this cable from here all the way around the side, and we need to attach this to the pump header, which is on here now as well. But what I'm going to do, guys, is I'm going to, whilst I'm connecting those, I'm going to connect our USB 3, our USB 2, our HD audio, and our front panel connectors, and I'll get a close-up to show you step by step. Right then, guys, so essentially what we're going to be doing now is connecting all the front panel I/O. What I'll do is I've zoomed in from the above camera to show you a close-up of where these are going to be connected and how, okay? So we'll start off with the easiest one, our HD audio, okay? So all you'll see is on our HD audio, you'll see a blank, okay? So you've got one pin, blank, one pin, one pin, one pin, okay? And essentially our HD audio goes down to this bottom corner down here in the left. There we go. Right, that's our HD audio. And now what we're going to do is connect our USB 2. And again, there is a blank in this bottom left-hand corner. So all we have to do is match that to our USB header, which is down here. Then we have got our USB 3, which is down here. And again, you've got a notch on the top of the USB, and there is a notch in the USB as well. So essentially, just match those up, and be careful when you're putting these ones in, guys. You can bend the pins, so just be careful. And again, we'll sort out the cables afterwards. So then, guys, next step is our power switch, reset switch, and power LED lights, etc., etc. So if you don't know, please check your manual. There is a little key here that you can follow also, but we need to be connected to our JFP1. And the first thing I like to do is connect our power switch. Now, on the back of these, you will find there's a little arrow which indicates the positive. So if you look at this here, we've got a blank on the very end, and then we should be applying our power switch. So our power switch goes on the very next two with the positive to the left, and then under that is our reset switch. So if we find our reset switch, which is here, again, positive is to the left. So we want positive on the right. So we need to turn it the other way around, and we can apply that one just underneath the power switch, okay? Next to the power switch is normally the hard drive, which is HDD light, which is there. You've got positive, which is on the left, indicated by the arrow. And we need it on the left as well. So we can attach that one as well, just there. And then the only two we've got left is our positive power LED and our negative power LED. And on the key, it states that the positive needs to be on the left and the negative needs to be on the right. I always find this easy, guys, to put them both together just like this, and then you should be able to just slide them on. There we go. Right, just firmly push down on them to ensure that they're all attached, but that essentially is our front panel I/O all connected. So just a quick recap then, guys. Down the bottom left, we've got our HD audio, we've got our USB 2, we've got our USB 3, and we've got our front panel power reset buttons, etc. just there. What we also have, guys, from our CPU cooler is we have our RGB connection. Now, this can be daisy chained via this connection here, or we want to be using this connection here, okay? So this is a 5-volt connection just there, and this needs to go to a 5-volt header on our motherboard. Please don't connect a 5-volt to a 12-volt out on your motherboard, or you could cause some potential issues. Very straightforward then, guys. 2 pins blank and then a pin, 2 pins blank and then a pin. We can just go ahead and we can connect that onto our RGB header, which is up there, all sorted. Again, I'll sort out the cables afterwards. I'm not too fussed about those. We'll get those nice and hidden. So then, guys, what we've got now is we've got one fan which is located here. We've got another fan which is located here, and we've got another fan which is located here. Now, in terms of the fans, this is your PWM connection, and these are your RGB connections, okay? So essentially, what we want to be doing is taking one of these connections here and daisy chaining all of these PWMs together, okay? So that's 1, that's 2, and then our third one, where are you, little bugger? There we go. So that's our third one just there. And that now means that all 3 of those fans have now got power. And we need to connect this one here to our CPU header on our motherboard. But what you will see, guys, is we have got our 3 RGB connections here, and I'll sort them out in a second once I've connected the CPU header. What we need to do now is we have got our CPU header, which is here, and that can connect up here. So last but not least, guys, we've got our pump, which is here, pump header. And you'll notice this is not a 4-pin, it's only a 3-pin, but it doesn't matter. What you can do is you can attach the 3-pin header to a 4-pin. So just make sure that it's fitting and all aligning up. So what we're going to do, guys, now to connect this RGB for this 360mm cooler, can you remember the little second attachment on this CPU header? What we need to do is push that through to the back of the case, and you will see that is just here now, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to daisy chain that to the rest of the RGB from the actual fans, okay? So very, very, very straightforward. The easiest way to do it is to get fan number 1, and you'll see that there is a male end and a female end. What we need to do is remove the little cover off of this RGB. If I can do it one hand. There we go. And we want to take fan 1, and we're going to push this into here, like that. There we go. Right. Then you will see we take the other male end, and we're going to take fan 2, which is this one here, and we take the female end. And again, all we need to do is to connect those up like that. Oh, I've pulled that one out. There we go. And then we uncover the third one, and we can push that one onto here like that. And then you've got one which is covered up just at the end. So essentially, guys, we've removed the 3 covers, and all we've done is we've took the daisy chain off of the CPU header, or the pump header, should we say, and then we've pushed it through and we've daisy chained the other 3 fans all together. That means that the 4-pin PWM headers to provide power are all connected, and then we have connected all the RGB together so it's all daisy chained. So the lighting effects on the front of your CPU cooler are going to be then copied on the fans themselves. Right then guys, next step is our PSU or power supply. And again, this is the RM650. This will be mounted at the rear here, connected by 4 screws to keep it in place. And there's a little bracket and a side bracket on the side just located there. Very, very straightforward. I'll get it unpacked and we'll get it installed. So this PSU, guys, really nice unit from Corsair, this RM650. Quite a nice power supply, to be quite frank with you. Really nice, not too heavy, fully modular, all blacked out with modular cables as well. So just so you're aware, Corsair are kind enough to provide you with some zip ties and obviously the mounting screws. And in the case, there's a different orientation of cables, or should we say a different variation of cables. But in this particular instance, we need the 24-pin, we need the CPU power cable, we need a SATA power cable, and then we need our 2 8-pin PCIe cables for our graphics card. So installing our power supply, guys, into our case, very, very, very straightforward. At the back of our power supply, you will see that there is 4 mounting holes located in each corner of the power supply. All we're simply going to do is put our power supply in, rest it on the actual brackets themselves, and then screw with the 4 included screws here into the back of the case, just like this, okay? Very, very straightforward. Now, things to note here, guys. You will see there is a fan just here. We don't want to be putting our fan up against the back of our motherboard tray. You'll be suffocating it, and chances are your power supply won't last as long and it'll be getting very, very hot, okay? Second of all, what I always like to do is install our cables before we actually install our power supply, because you tend to find that there's less room to get in and you can't actually see what you're doing. So now our power supply is fully installed, guys, all secure with our fan facing outwards. We've got these cables that are hanging out the back. What we need to proceed to do now is we need to route these cables through the relevant holes to enable us to cable manage it as effectively as possible. The last connection that we need to make is our SATA data connection, which we need to shove into one of our SATA data ports, which we can do anywhere on these 6 ports just the back of here. So I will use this top one up here. We'll do it as close as we can to the inner, which is like that. And then all we're going to do is feed this through to the back so we can connect our SSD. Right then, so last couple of things. Now, this bit will be slightly different, I believe, for you guys, because you'll actually have your SSD trays. So essentially what you're going to do is you're going to take your SSD, you're going to mount that to a tray, and that will screw in utilizing these 4 screws here. And then you would use your SATA data connection and your SATA power connection to your SSD. Now, in this case, because this case is not brand new, I haven't been given these SSDs. So what I'm going to do in that instance is just use a bit of 3M tape to stick to the inner side of the SSD and stick it to where it was. I did have another option of pushing the SSD up the back and then installing it so the SSD wouldn't even be on show. But number one, when it comes to checking the connections, it's not as easy. And number 2, it's not the proper way of doing it. So I'd rather have it stuck by some 3M tape, and then it's easily accessible. All we've got to do now, guys, is stick on our SATA data connection, which goes just up here, and then our SATA power connection, which is just here. Power and data to our SSD. 24-pin CPU pin and 2 8 PCIe cables running through to the front. We've already connected our power cable. We've already connected our CPU power. We've already connected our SSD. We've got our M.2, which is installed, our CPU installed. Last thing, the most expensive part in most builds, which is the GPU. So before installing our GPU, guys, what we need to do, the easiest way of making sure that we don't remove any of these that we don't need, is just lining the graphics card up with the back of the case, and you can see which 2 slots that you need to remove if it is a 2-slot card. Now, I know that this is slot number 2 and slot number 3 that will need to be removed. So just remove the thumb screws, and then you can remove these little brackets at the back. So what we need to do now, guys, that our brackets have been removed at the back, slots 2 and 3. If we orientate the GPU, line it up against our PCIe lane and make sure that our PCIe lane is open. What we need to do then, line it up, push it in with a little bit of force, not too much force, until we hear a click. And there we go. We can put back the 2 thumb screws that we've just removed. And then the last step, guys, is connecting our PCIe cables. Now, this particular GPU has an 8-pin and a 6-pin. So what you'll notice, guys, is on this particular power cable here, you've got one that's down here, and then you've got another one which is up here. What I would advise is don't daisy chain them together. Actually run 2 separate power cables. That way you're going to be receiving a cleaner power and more efficiency. And not only that, if you've got some, should we say, power hungry GPUs like a 3080 or a 3090, it's much nicer to have separate cables rather than just daisy chaining them, using that one and then turning it over and using this one at the same time. Now that we've attached our PCIe power for our graphics card, we can then proceed to tidy up these cables, pushing the rest out of the back, zip tying these other parts down so they don't look as bad as what they do now. And we're nearly there, guys. We'll put the front panel back on, ensure that you've put any filters back, and then we can attach some power and see if we reach that boot stage. So one final look, guys, just before we put this side panel and front panel back on. It's ultra clean, really, really clean. I mean, I've just swapped the power cables round because it looked atrocious. So we've managed to zip tie them underneath and obviously sort out these power cables here. But overall, really, really, really pleased with regards to how it's come out. Yes, we had a bit of issues with regards to clearance once we'd installed the radiator, so we had to remove that. Yes, we removed the cables for the fans down here and we routed them behind the back of the fans so the cables weren't showing there. And again, I've tried to keep it as clean could be at the front, whilst obviously not causing any issues. But I'm hoping you guys all say, yeah, he's done a good job there. So if you think there's anything that you would have changed or done different, leave a comment down below and we can have a discussion and a debate about it down below. But overall, really, really pleased. We're there, I can see it. All 9 RGB fans are spinning, which is good. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, all got RGB, which is fine. The pump's got RGB, which is great. And the motherboard and GPU have power as well. So overall, guys, let's just have a bit of a peel. There we go. You can see it in its glory there. So overall, really, really pleased, guys, with how it's turned out. So we've got black on black. Yes, it's rainbow puke to begin with, but it's ideal just to showcase. Obviously, I've not got a monitor hooked up. I've not got any of the GPU, or should we say the LEDs all hooked up or changed to how we want it. If I change these fans, then the top ones will change and they'll all be able to sync. So the Chinese fans all come with a little remote, so you can obviously change it via the remote. The top ones are connected to the motherboard, so you can go into Dragon Center and change them around, no problems at all. But overall, really, really pleased. How was the case to build in? Now, compared to the Lian, there were a few little snags where you just think, they've saved money, and that's why I've paid a lot less than what I would have if I'd have bought a Lian case. So I dislike, obviously, where the grommets would be. We're having those grommets there. The rubber grommets make a big difference. It closes up the holes where you're not using. Number 2, where you are using them, it makes it a lot more aesthetically pleasing to look at. And number 3, it's not as sharp on the cables either. Second thing is not a lot of clearance if you're using a 360 rad at the top to push in your CPU power cable. So ensure that if you are routing, obviously your cables, do it before you put the radiator in, or you'll do like I did, have to take the radiator out to reroute the cables. Number 3, obviously this slit down the side here where your radiator meets the side of your motherboard is again really, really thin. If you've got fans installed already, which 90% of people would, then you're going to obviously have to take one of those fans out to get it through, or really pull on it, guys. And I managed to get one through, but I just thought, do you know what? It's 10 times easier. 4 screws, take that fan out. But overall, cable management at the back, easy, just as a Lian Li would be. Again, we've got 9 fans in here. There's plenty of room in the back of there. No issues, no problems. Storage wise, again, 1.5 terabytes, 1 terabytes of SSD and 500 gigs worth of M.2. So that's where his boot drive will be installed when we get it all up and running. But overall, aesthetically, I think it's really, really pretty to look at. I do like the smaller form factor. I think that it's more compact. It makes the case a lot more full. And yeah, overall, I'm really, really happy. If you are looking for a Lian Li lookalike case, then you won't go far wrong with this. I can feel the airflow is half decent. And again, guys, these aren't like QL120s or LL120s, MLs, etc. So they aren't obviously creating a huge amount of static pressure, but I can feel it out of the side. I can feel it at the top, and I can feel that air's being pushed up, obviously, from these fans as well. So overall, really, really impressed. So I've got no hesitation of saying Tecware VXR, is it worth it? Absolutely. Would you be dissatisfied? I don't think so. So that's it from me, guys. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, leave a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe because it really, really helps me out. I just want to say again, thank you for all the continued support. We finally hit that 1,000 subscribers and it's all down to you guys. So all the very best. Thank you to each and every one of you. My name's been Gareth. This has been Tech Check, and I'll see you in the next one.